Now welcome to another edition of News from Naboo with the worst lightning takes. And let's get right to the news.
Alright, we're going to cover some more Leslye Headland interviews because of course she's making the full circuit and she has a lot to say. First they ask her about how in the finale, Osha, she kills Sol as he's trying to say he loves her. Okay. Headland says it was always the plan to have Osha kill Sol because Luke forgives his father. Luke throws away his lightsaber and embraces the destruction of that generational lineage with forgiveness and compassion. He's a good and noble character, the epitome of a Star Wars hero, and this show is about Star Wars villains. She needed to destroy that generational lineage. We knew that you would slowly understand over the course of 8 episodes that Osha had put so much faith into Sol and was hoping to receive the love she had received as a child. I know the Jedi wouldn't use the word love, but that's what she was seeking. She needed to say, it does not matter if you say I love you, because I've been living in the shadow of this my whole life.
Jedi can love. It's the very foundation of their entire being. She needs to listen to and read some George Lucas quotes where he talks about how much the Jedi are allowed to love. They're just not allowed to be possessive.
And of course that's the problem with Anakin ultimately is you're allowed to love people, but you're not allowed to possess them.
That's true. That's where Anakin crossed the line. He got a little
he's
possessive.
allowed to love Padme. He can even go spend time with her. The Jedi. I mean, he wasn't fooling anybody.
No.
Everybody knew he was hanging out with Padme.
Everybody knows.
How they didn't realize that he was becoming attached to her is a question. But Jedi are absolutely allowed to love. Mm-hmm. They can say, I love you. Even Obi-Wan. I love you, Anakin. You were my brother. I mean, he meant it. Mm-hmm. He loved him. He was just willing to let him go. It was hard for him because he had to kill him to let him go, but he was willing to do it.
The Sol situation was very odd because, they showed him from the beginning. Jackie's like, hey, you still look at that old recording there of Osha and your old Padawan, and isn't that bad? And he's like, oh no, I'm just kind of remembering. And then as the flashback sequences come, they make him look like crazy. No, I have a connection to Osha. I need to save her. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean,
because he did not act like that when he reunited with her. He was more nonchalant.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little strange for him to be looking at like old recordings. I don't know if the Jedi would be. I mean, because that is kind of attachment. He needs to be like, okay, she moved on with her life. I got to move on with mine. But he can still love her technically, but he has to be willing to let her go. And I feel like early on in the season he had, and as the show goes on, it's like no, he never did. He's been like weirdly obsessed with her. I don't know.
And then she makes some weird comments about Manny's character, the Stranger, who we, for some reason, don't have his name because we would care about his name, I guess. I don't know. His name doesn't mean anything. There's no point in calling him the Stranger.
Yeah, it's not like, his real name was Plagueis all
It's not
along.
like Gandalf being referred to as the mysterious stranger because they don't want to ruin that he was,
that he's Meteor Man / Gandalf.
Meteor Man, yeah.
Rings of Power, spoiler alert.
Giving us the name of the Stranger doesn't give us anything.
Well, or Khmer, yeah. It doesn't mean anything to us. We have anything to reference it against, essentially.
Yes. But they kind of asked her, hey, Osha's like a woman coming of age through this power that her father figure, aka Sol, gave her and then denied her, entwined with discovering her sexuality.
Wow.
Headland says, there is a danger in Manny's character too. You should question his philosophy because it is just another philosophy. But he's telling her his truth, and she can ascribe to it or not. He can see in her, and she can see in him, the reflection of losing something. She's being offered a different way. The question is, do you reject that other way because of the implication that the dark side is wrong without ever having tapped into it? Or do you accept it because it's already there inside you?
What?
I don't know. It sounds like something you'd worry about if you're, like, with serial killers.
Well, he is a serial killer, right?
The question is, do you reject, being a serial killer and hurting people because there's an implication that doing such is wrong without ever trying it? Do you just reject it without trying it?
That's a good point.
Because it's already inside you. You should... No, you sometimes right from wrong, you know it because you're supposed to.
Well,
it's like knowing not to touch fire. We don't have to all stick our hand into a flame to realize this is bad and dangerous.
Yes. No, I think it's a ridiculous thing that she's kind of saying here because, I mean, maybe you're going a bit extreme, but there is this weird implication, like, until you actually, like, do something terrible, you don't understand it's wrong.
Just because you can feel like there's
Imagine-
something inside of you that might be pulling you to do the wrong thing, that doesn't mean you give in and do the wrong thing just to see how it feels.
Imagine if most humans didn't understand or had to do something truly heinous and morally wrong to figure out it's wrong. Like, we would be killing each other left and right. It'd be horrible. It's a weird thing to
dangerous,
not be
yeah.
able to just recognize that something is evil and wrong without having to experience it. I don't know. I don't know if that's even what she's saying. It's kind of gobbledygook, to be honest with you.
And then she moves on to talk about another one of her influences for the Acolyte, because all she had was influences, honestly. She took a little of this from everything. She says, "A big influence for me was Fight Club. It's about being stuck in institutions and expectations. Tyler Durden is so compelling that despite the fact that some things he's encouraging get scarier and scarier, the idea is so seductive. That is really what happens with Manny's character in episode 6 when he says, 'When you lose everything, that's when you're free.' That's lifted from Tyler Durden. When you lose your attachment to these institutions, when you fail within the outline of what you're supposed to be, that's when you start being yourself."
The
She's
Sith have
trying to
no greater...
overthink things, yeah.
Yeah, she's trying to sound very philosophical, and I'm not trying to be an ass, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense, especially for a Sith.
Obviously, the Sith are always unhappy because they never get enough of anything they want. Mostly their selfishness centers around power and control. And the struggle is always to be able to let go of all that stuff.
Their greatest fear is losing everything.
They crave power
Yeah.
more than anything.
Yeah, they're entirely self-serving. The only thing they care about in terms of an institution is being able to use it to their advantage. If it has no meaning or value to them, they would ditch it anyway.
Well, he's probably considering when you lose everything. He's talking more about when you lose things like your values and your morals.
Well, sure, but
Yeah,
they never
then you're
really...
free.
Well,
Because
yeah,
now
but
you're
then
free to do whatever you want with your power. You have no more restrictions because you're not following rules.
But then you're a horrible person. We all have to put restriction. We all either have to
That's
find
why
our
they're
own moral
Sith.
compass to restrict ourselves because that's what we believe, or society has to tell the people who wouldn't do that, hey, you can't do that or you're going to be punished.
Well, that's another reason. I mean, she lifted that shot. She's straight from Fight Club. You know, the end scene when the two of them are watching the world burn from their tower. Yeah, she kind of lined that up on purpose. She wanted it to feel as much like it as possible because, as she puts it, these two are going to burn the world down. The dramatic irony is that they certainly aren't going to get far enough to take down the part of the world that tells them they can't exist. She said that Kathleen Kennedy also suggested that they be twins, the two of them, when originally she was going to pitch just having two sisters on opposite ends of the spectrum. But Kennedy was like, no, they should be twins because Kathleen herself is a twin.
Really?
I didn't know that. So they said they just needed to find an actor who could do that, and they came with this idea that these two girls would be influenced by two male authority figures who offer two different paths.
Oh boy, they had to stick the word male in there as if it matters,
Yeah.
as if that's the lesson here to take away, right?
I mean, they could have had her Padawaning under
What about
anyone.
Vestra Rowe, who was the master of Khmer? Is she to blame because she's female or something? Is that
I
the
don't know
takeaway
anymore.
from that? I don't know. That she whipped him? Like, literally, it seems like?
With her light whip?
Yeah. I'm just asking
Maybe.
questions.
I
I'm
don't
curious
know.
what
There's a lot of
the deeper meaning there is supposed to be.
And then she kind of moves on to talk about Plagueis. About the fact that we know that Osha and May are created from a vergence of the Force, that Anastasia is the one that created them through the vergence on Brendok. She said, I was interested in the fact that this power would have existed on its own. A vergence on a planet is naturally occurring concentration of the Force if it's in a location rather than a person, like Anakin. It would be like tapping into oil. The Jedi are seeing these women tap into this vergence like they're tapping into a natural resource. It wouldn't fit into the Jedi's idea for that to be left unregulated.
Okay. It's like oil in the ground? That's what we're calling it? That's our comparison?
Well, it's the weird wording that I think is, and I am not the expert, of course, that you are. The twins were created from a vergence that existed naturally inside of a planet. They're saying that Anakin himself was a vergence.
That's really not how it's described in Phantom Menace.
Oh,
It's described as a vergence around Anakin. I mean, I don't know if that's saying the same thing, essentially. I mean, in all honesty, like, we don't really know much about a vergence, especially, the Lucas point of view. It's just a word he uses, kind of. We don't know if he really meant anything more with it, or if it's just kind of a gobbledygook explanation to, tell us why Anakin is so special. He was made by the Force. He is a vergence in the Force. You could argue one of the problems.
I almost think the greatest thing was not really having an explanation behind him being a creation of the Force in order to bring balance.
Well, that's where I was just going with it. You could argue one of the problems with the prequels is we never really get explanations as to what is Anakin. Was he just made by the Force? Is there something else involved? What does the prophecy say? You could look at it two ways. That's kind of we're left to interpret it, and we can come to our own conclusions, and that can be cool. Or like we're so lacking in information that it kind of hampers the story.
Right, now let's get on to one of her more controversial quotes,
Oh,
I guess. I don't know. It's just
controversial yet.
they kind of talk about her decision with Vestra placing the blame on Sol, who has passed away. That he is the scapegoat for everything that has happened. Headland's response is, they're probably going to be mad that I'm talking so much about my queerness, but I'm going to do it because I made a Star Wars, and only a few people have done that, and I'm a queer woman. I had a therapist once who told me that coming out as a queer person is not what makes your parents upset. They've known that, subconsciously or not, for a long time. What they're mad about is revealing a secret. That dynamic is also driving Vestra. She understands Sol was emotionally compromised when she looked around at what happened with these 4 Jedi. Does he deserve to take the fall completely? Of course not, but she has to protect her institution. People get caught up in heroes and villains and get distracted by what's actually going on. It's how the people in power stay in power. It's how we have a country where corporations are considered human beings. Yes.
I'm lost.
She kind of talks in circles. It's like she talks about what she wants to talk about. It's like she's doing like a professional political debate.
She'll
should
touch
be a
on the
topic
after that
very
one.
briefly, but turn it into something else.
She didn't really even focus on the topic, did she?
They were talking about asking her about Venestra's choice to place all the blame for everything that happened on Sol.
Well, that's one of the biggest issues people have with the show is now we have to... because we see at the end she goes to talk to Master Yoda, right? Mm-hmm. So, assuming she is telling Yoda the truth, that means Yoda knows the truth. He knows that Sol wasn't responsible. Mm-hmm. He knows there is potentially some sort of powerful dark side user out there. Or she was able to lie to Yoda, and Yoda just couldn't tell. He didn't know. Those seem to be our only two options, and that's what angers people. Yeah,
and she's definitely acknowledging that Vestra is a bad person in this. I feel like in this statement.
Well, sure. Well, that's obvious. Saying that I don't know how you would defend that otherwise.
People get distracted by heroes and villains, hence she threw Sol under the bus here as a villain, kind of to distract them from what's going on, because she wants to stay in power. That she's concerned more about a corporation and making that into being a living entity, I suppose.
Well, I don't understand the first part either. She's talking about her queerness and parents and how that has anything to do with Vestra. I'm not sure.
It doesn't. I think it's just because she's trying to imply that Vestra always knew what was going on, just like her parents always knew she was gay.
Oh.
I think that was the comparison.
But why is that part of the story?
It's not.
How does that...
It's not.
Okay.
She also says now that the show is out, I'm reaching my breaking point of people saying, you're making Star Wars political. First of all, George started that. He spent 3 of his films about the conflict between the Senate, the Jedi, and the Separatists. And overall, art is political. There's this thought that I'm putting something in the water supply, and honestly, I really didn't think about it that much. I'm referencing the things I like, just as George or Ryan or J.J. Abrams did.
I don't think anybody has a problem with Star Wars being political. I think it's when you insert your own politics and make them the forefront. Like, this story is about what I believe politically. Like, George didn't really... certainly George has his political beliefs, but the message of the prequels is simply democracy can be threatened at any time. And so much so that people don't even realize it is being threatened. You have to be vigilant is one of the things he has said. You always have to be vigilant of who is going to come in and seize power or just kind of steal it out from under your nose, and you're going to, be welcoming them in with thunderous applause.
It's ultimately a discussion about how fragile democracy is. Mm-hmm. And how democracies sometimes get turned over to tyrants with applause, and that we should always be vigilant as citizens to make sure that doesn't happen.
He wasn't really trying to make any kind of political statement about the world itself.
He wasn't doing a direct comparison to the world today, presently. Like, you could be like, oh, that really hits home.
Yeah. There are so many,
She's made it directly to current political topics.
Not even necessarily, but I just don't think anybody really had a problem with her insertion of politics. It's the fact that she is influenced by these certain things that made her write the story a certain way. If that makes sense.
And then the next thing they talked about is the growing enthusiasm for the romance plot in the fan cams of Manny. Headland says, one thing I've noticed since about episode 5 or 6 is the female response to the show. You have a lot of fans who feel like, I can be vocal now because someone is making something that I feel validated by. It's been my experience that the most disrespected demographic is young women. Not in Star Wars, but everywhere. There's a real concept of assuming that, especially with large IP, young women are expected to just get on board.
Well, everybody's expected to get on board with an IP if it has an established identity, right?
Well, and why? Why do they have to get on board?
Well,
why does this expectation exist?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying, right?
Like,
Star Wars is what it is. I don't know that you can tailor it to certain groups without making it something different. It is kind of a general appeal, right? Mm-hmm. You are an example of a woman who's loved Star Wars as long as you've known about it, basically, right?
Right. It's never needed to be tailored to me to love it. The thing is, you love things because you love them, not because they're 100% tailored to you. I don't know. It's a weird concept because as a girl who's liked geeky stuff my whole life, I've never expected it to be tailored to me.
What I find interesting about this is there's like, kind of what you're saying here. It's like there's just this implication that young women are going to only like a certain thing, which I think is really kind of insulting in a way, right? That you're only here because you want these romances and these, that you wouldn't actually just be interested in Star Wars for the sci-fi and the fantasy aspect of it. It's
just a weird thing to say her experience is that the most disrespected demographic is young women.
Well, I feel disrespected when I watch Bridgerton.
Makes no sense.
It doesn't. No, I'm serious. I've watched a little bit with you.
You have.
And I watch it and I go, well, this really doesn't feel like it's for me, and that's fine. I move on. I don't feel like I'm disrespected because Bridgerton doesn't cater to me. I don't think it should.
There are plenty of things out there that young women watch. Just because you're not always into the big IP of the now doesn't mean people expect you to be. It's very... No. She has a very weird way of putting things, in my opinion. They kind of prompt her by saying they think the guest producers make assumptions that young female fans are like a secondary market. Headland responds with, they assume they're going to get them, because something like Marvel is a brilliant 4-quadrant initiative. Women continue to be fans of those things. But with the Acolyte, they could be like, hold on a second, this feels specifically for me. The MCU is full of gym rats with incredible bodies, but none of them are sensual or actively pursuing physical intimacy with another character, female or not. That's what makes the Stranger different. Manny's character is explicitly sensual. That is a bit wish fulfillment to me in the fan fiction of my girlhood, but I'd argue part of my fandom is that.
What?
Yeah.
So Marvel doesn't need to do this because women find it enjoyable without it, but Star Wars needs to do it because women don't find it enjoyable without it?
She says that all of the incredible bodied MCU people, they aren't sensual. None of them are sensual.
Well, I can think of a couple.
Or actively pursuing physical intimacy. So because it's not a romance? Because it's not like...
Explicitly a romance? There's no explicit romance really in Marvel. I mean, the closest thing is probably, Pepper and Tony? Is the
Well, there was probably a little bit with...
Peter Parker as well. I mean, Spider-Man and MJ to a degree.
To a degree, but not full,
Yeah.
You could even argue Black Widow and Hulk or Bruce Banner.
Yeah, okay.
Had some moments. Even, honestly, Vision and Wanda.
Okay, there are a few.
There are a few couples. Just because they don't have to, go full into that doesn't mean that there's not... I don't know why we had to put this weird wish fulfillment of putting a hot Sith in there.
Gamora
saying, you know what, there you go.
Star-Lord as well.
There's something for you to
well, it's really just boiling women down to... Yeah, that women will only watch something if it's has a hot guy in it to...
So, next project from Leslye Headland is Magic Mike Star Wars edition?
I guess
because that's the only thing we young women want to see is...
I think it's insulting. It would be like just saying, well, men only watch it if you have hot women in it, and Star Wars kind of, well, there are some hot women in Star Wars too, but I don't know why we have to assume women want this very particular thing, why they can't just like something for what it is, that
because
they can't enjoy sci-fi and fantasy. I don't think it's hard to figure out what women want.
They want good stories too. The more they try to figure something out, the worse they actually get to getting it right.
Well, I mean, I can't speak as a woman, obviously, but you can. So, I mean, we've had many talks about this kind of thing. So you've always explained to me you just like it for what it is. The more you actually find them tailoring it to you, the less interested you tend to be, I think. Not that you can't like shows because you like Bridgerton, you like other shows that are more female-centric, certainly.
I do.
But, like, you watch Star Wars, so you watch Marvel because you like Star Wars and Marvel.
Yes. Yes, I do.
I mean, what a crazy concept. And I think there are a ton of other women out there.
It's not like I'm watching Marvel waiting to see who's going to get hot and heavy in the next scene. I don't understand how she could be this confused about what women want. If women aren't watching Star Wars already, they're not going to join just because all of a sudden you go, hey guys, there's a hot Sith guy in this episode and he's going to seduce that girl and bring her to the dark side and corrupt her. It's going to be great.
I think that's a great point.
Is that really going to bring new female fans in just to see you like have a girl fall into a position where she's getting corrupted into the bad? I mean, usually when the trope is you put the bad boy in there for the girl to save, I can fix him, I can make it better. And they kind of learn from their mistake and then go after the nicer guy, or they succeed in changing the bad boy into someone who will love and cherish them. This is just, look, I went off with the bad boy and he wiped my sister's memory and helped me kill my old master just so that I could break free of something I didn't know I needed to be free of.
Yes. Makes total sense.
No, it does not make
Fantastic. This is what young women should be watching.
No. Like I said, if they're not watching Star Wars already, this isn't going to bring them in. This wasn't
nor
like...
is it going to keep them.
It wasn't heavy in the marketing either.
No, it wasn't really in the marketing at all.
Bingo. It wasn't in the marketing, so... How did she think people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I started watching this in the hopes that there might be some hot guy in there? The more interviews she does, the more confused about the concepts of the show in general I think I get.
I think she had a ton of things she wanted to incorporate into this show.
Too many.
Ton of them, and way too many, and she didn't know how to focus on any of them.
So she threw all of her favorite inspirations in there.
Everything got thrown
at the wall. Mashed it in there.
Yes. And it's a show about fathers and queerness and about women liking hot naked guys and how the Sith need to be free and how the Jedi are flawed, and it's just all in there. It's just a big witch's brew of crap.
Yeah. Literally everything she said she's drawn inspiration from, she has put in this show.
Yeah.
It almost feels like copyright claims need to be filed because the Acolyte just ripped off everything that's ever been out there.
Yeah. All right. But I think for now, that is going to be all we got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell us what you make of anything she had to say. Do you agree? Do you disagree with us? Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.